needs to be rekindled. So however you choose to approach it, I would just encourage our listener to approach it from that honest standpoint and open communication of what the real issue is.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really good note. And he says that. He says that in the letter, like, hey, plan A, if I had my druthers, I want more of her.
Right.
Plan B would be, exiting the relationship and getting it elsewhere. And that was something Dr. Hartman had also pointed out in her letter back, is she said, hey, there's always the risk that you might reconnect with that other person in your friends with benefits arrangement, and you don't seem to have a history of having that. Like, you seem to have been the monogamous one, and so she risks you giving up on her entirely and kind of being a one-woman guy. And so that might be problematic, for your girlfriend, that she might say, hey, you know what? I don't know. You don't have a history of juggling 3 girls. Like, you kind of stick to one. And if you're really going to audition another girl, I think you're going to replace me. Or there's that possibility anyway. So that was something else that Dr. Hartman had brought up. But, I want to talk about, to anybody, regardless of... So this is where I'm zooming out from the writer himself, but also thinking about the greater audience. I think anybody who's been in a long-term relationship, Nick, whether that's heterosexual, homosexual, traditional monogamous, polyamory, whatever it is, I think it is a human condition to notice that sexual fulfillment can wane, right? And that the sexual dynamics can decrease. And as Dr. Hartman says, there's hormones that are at play here too. So there's a really good book on this subject called Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. And you see her if you type Esther Perel into the internet. She's got great TED Talks. She talks a lot about sex and affairs and all sorts of things. But she writes this book called Mating in Captivity, which is specifically about how to rekindle sexual excitement in a long-term relationship. And basically the thesis of her book is that what makes something sexy is often the unpredictability of it, the mystery of it. There's something about it that is not just familiar to us. And it's that excitement of the other, right? And so there is this expectation of, the thrill of it. And she talks about how that's how a lot of people get seduced into affairs, is because it's the call of the wild. It's the call of the unknown. And she talks about how in these long-term relationships, we can get so settled into the familiarity that exactly the thing which is causing us to feel loved and cared for and safe is making us non-sexual. And so she has these great lines in the book where she talks about, like, there is no sexuality and safety. And so it's weird because she kind of says, hey, the way that you rekindle sex is you have to rediscover mystery. And so she kind of brings that into the book of talking that through and saying, okay, here's how I want you guys to kind of re-engage the relationship. Because a lot of therapists, Nick, will say, okay, sex is getting stale. Here's what I need you guys to do. I want you to talk about it. I want you to communicate. Communication's always the key. And what Dr. Perel would say is, actually, no. Communication's the enemy.
Make it worse.
Yeah, it's going to make it worse. Because you're over-talking.
Yeah.
You're over-talking, you're over-normalizing, you're over-familiarizing, you're over-understanding. Yep. I don't want you to get each other better. I want you to get each other less. I want to create distance. I want to create mystery. I want to put a shroud of misunderstanding between you. Because if I can start to blind you to the full awareness of the other person, they again become interesting to you. And it's that fascination and that mystery that leads to a desire to discover. And that's what the sex is the pursuit of the unknown a little bit. It's a great book. So it's called Mating in Captivity, Esther Perel. I have an entire presentation on this that I've given, and our Patreons could have gotten that if they would have voted for it. But our patrons all voted against the learning idea to be a specific benefit on Patreon.
But
so
thank you
pox
for your
on
support.
your houses. yeah, but thank you for your support.
Let's not beat up the people who support us.
All right, this is Jim. You know what? This is really about the aces. I'm realizing I'm acting out because this is about the aces and my unsettled resentments. But no, to the writer, Anonymous Scoop, dude, we love you, man, and thank you so much for writing in. My encouragement to you is, yes, you guys do need to have a conversation because there's the interplay of your arrangement, and you need to check and make sure that's still valid. But if your first desire is to rekindle the romance between you and your girl, I would like to see you engage the strategies in Mating in Captivity, which is to increase the strangeness and the distance and the familiarity, to kind of diminish that a little bit, not in negative, hurtful ways, but in these intelligent, kind of thoughtful ways. And so I want you to consider what that looks like to kind of rekindle the mystery of the relationship, I think you'll notice that actually increases some of her libido and maybe even hormone levels. I'd be interested to know if that's how it works. But yeah, man, thanks for writing in. And to everybody out there, this is a common human thing. Be encouraged that there's ways to address this, and just because it's getting a little stale between the sheets, that does not mean that the relationship is powerless or cannot be improved. Nick and I would be out of business if humans couldn't change.
Exactly. Thank you for writing in. That was great.
Thank you for writing in. Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, toxic mothers and how to deal with them. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Hey, TheraPals, have you purchased your tickets to Scoop Fest 2018 yet?
Fest. 2018.
2018. All right. So we need to talk about sushi, psychology, and sake.
Yeah!
So we have some listeners. Some of our listeners are going to be there for Scoop Fest. Yes. So we are going to have a little lunch.
Yeah.
We are going to do sushi at Naked Fish's Thursday, October 11th at noon.
Again, we're going to have sushi and sake. Maybe if I could talk Nick into trying sake for
Probably
the first
not.
time.
That's not the first time I've had it.
Well, you need to have good sake for the first time. It's going to be at Naked Fish's on Thursday, October 11th at 12 o'clock noon.
So, if we are put in charge of organizing this, which I think is a bad idea, but we can do it.
Yeah.
We need to know a head count. So
Yes.
if you're interested in joining Jim and myself and a few of our listeners for sushi,
Contact
October
us
11th,
by any method you have.
Any method whatsoever.
Twitter, Facebook, you can go to the Patreon and tag us, or you can just email us straight up at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. Podtherapyguys@gmail.com. Let us know if you're going to be joining us for sushi, sake, and psychology, October 11th at noon at Naked Fish in fabulous Las Vegas.
Yep, and let us know how many of you are going to be there, and then I will make arrangements.
Yep.
We'll get a table. All right, thank you, and we'll see you at Scoop Fest. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next listener writes in about his toxic relationship with his mother.
Ooh.
How do I deal with my toxic mom? I'm a guy in college, age 19, living at home with my parents. And forever now, my family, most especially my mom, hasn't been exactly what you'd call supportive. My mom, it's bad. It's clear she has mental illness, and this has severely impacted our relationship. When we were younger, she'd often go out on the weekends and never come home until either late Sunday or even early Monday morning, leading to a big fight with my dad. Several times she has tried self-harm in front of us, and once tried to jump out of a car on our way to school. It seems like she's projecting onto me. She'll make fun of me in a way an 8th grader would, making fun of my sexuality/gender. I've always been a straight guy, basically calling me a slut among other insults used for women. This greatly amuses her. Also, she has me pegged as a bigot/racist because apparently I support Trump, despite me saying I don't support anyone in politics at the moment and try to stay clear of that discussion. Meanwhile, her and my family will literally use racial slurs/stereotypes. It's clear my mom has some contempt towards me. I guess she wanted a daughter instead. My disability, which is a speech impediment, has always been the go-to thing to make fun of. And if I get mad, they're just teasing. I got some money for school recently after giving them about $150 as well as paying for my textbooks, since they took it without asking. But according to my mom, I didn't help them at all. I am an evil seed, full of German blood, a Nazi, and have no character. I didn't go to respond to what she was saying, so she got progressively angrier. I love to move out, but that's not an option for me. I don't have the know-how/means, and she kept me pretty sheltered. Do you guys have any words of wisdom?
Jeez, man. So, Nick, whenever I hear somebody described as toxic, I'm often a little reluctant, right? Because it's kind of a weaponized
It's an easy
word.
word to throw around.
It's easy, and I want to make sure that, I understand what that means. Usually I'll say, hey, the person isn't toxic, but the relationship maybe is. In this case, I'm kind of inclined to say, yeah, this person is a toxic person. They're unwell. Your childhood was spent watching this person disappear on weekend binges doing God knows what. And it's a parent. You're a child. You need your parent to make you feel safe. You need routine. And they're disappearing. And you're watching your father be upset with that. You're watching self-harm. You're watching her dive out of cars, that are moving. And then she's tearing you down, And I think that when a parental figure, and I think moms have a special place, but regardless, when a parental figure tears you down, it cuts in a more meaningful and deeper way than I think anybody else can. There's a lot of folks that will remember every criticism their father ever, had for them, or every time that they were, seen as less than by a parent or really taken down a notch. And so this is, I think, really toxic. And so my first observation is, I at least concur with that description of saying this is a toxic person. Something is going to have to be done. I don't know that we should just continue this indefinitely.
Right, I would agree. And I think keeping in mind that there's definitely some mental health issues going on here.
Yes, yeah.
Right. I think that would be the first thing that I would encourage our listener to kind of remember and keep in mind. Because, like you said, any of this coming from someone who is supposed to love and care about you can make this very, very hurtful and difficult to cope with. Just keeping things in perspective and realizing that she may not be like this without the mental illness.
That's true.
And it's unfortunate, and it really sucks that this is the hand that you're dealt. But this is what you're going to have to probably deal with. I think a big thing is you're going to have to find some way of coping with this to the best of your ability, realizing that she needs to get help.
I think at 19 years old, that's a big part of this equation that I find interesting. So your whole life, you have noticed this, you have been fused to it, you have been a minor, and she's your guardian. And so there is no way to get around it. And I think there's a lot of people, Nick, that I've met in life or that I've treated in life who had a very dysfunctional family or had a unhealthy home environment that was toxic and it was hard. And when they get to 18, 19, 20 years old, they're really looking forward to getting out of there. And it's probably in their best interest. I really do think that that's probably a good idea in this person's case, but he does say that's not available to me yet. That's not an option I can do.
And that was one thing that stuck out to me too, is that he writes that I don't have the means or the know-how, and that she kept me pretty sheltered.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm kind of looking at that, and I would really encourage you to take another look at that, and really kind of challenge that thought process. Is it that you don't have the know-how to do it?
Right.
Or is it just a lack of confidence that you don't feel like you can?
Yeah.
Because people do it. Like, people do move away from their parents, and it can be done. And you may struggle a bit at first, and you're going to have to learn some new skills.
Right.
But don't automatically close that door and say that it can't be done.
I want to agree with Nick on this. Nick, that's such a good observation. I'm so glad you brought it up. To the writer, I want to speak to you directly for a second. Listen, kid, we all felt like you feel, in the sense that you feel out of your element, you feel unprepared, you feel scared and intimidated, and you still identify mentally as somebody who's probably, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but you still identify as a child. And you look at this grown-up world and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to adult. I don't know how to pay rent. I don't know how to do taxes. I don't know how to, manage my life. I don't know how to be on my own. I'm not prepared for it. Let me tell you something. That is how every single one of us started. None of us got special training. We may have had parents that gave us a few more tips along the way. We may have had opportunities to grow up a little bit sooner than you. But you are exactly where you should be mentally. And this is your season. This is your opportunity. You are correct that you are living in a toxic environment. Now, we're going to give you some tips about how you can deal with that and still be in that toxic environment. But there are a lot of folks, just like you, who have had to make the decision to exit a toxic environment because it is an abusive relationship, because it is unhealthy, and because they are being hurt and wounded, and they have to make that decision. And a lot of times we can become codependent, and we can become afraid, and we sort of become subservient, and our fear of the outside world is bigger than our fear of the person who's abusing us. And so we stick around way longer than we should. And I'm going to tell you something, kid. 19 years old, you're going to make it. If you step out right now, if you go find a Craigslist ad and find a roommate out there and find an appropriate amount of rent, if you take that first brave step forward out of the